Hello everybody, this is Johns Hopkins with Baltimore Heritage, and we're back with another of our 5-Minute Histories videos. And if you're following along real time, more or less, you'll know that today is January 8th. And over the last couple days, we have watched in Washington, D.C. as our democracy, both figuratively and literally, has been under attack, where the rule of law has been questioned, and we're still in the middle of an epidemic, fighting an epidemic. Today, we thought we would turn back the clock 200 years and talk about a gentleman, an elected official in Baltimore, who in a sort of unbelievable parallel universe was grappling with three very similar issues to those. And that gentleman was Edward Johnson. His house is behind me. It's the White House at the end of the block. I'll apologize for the noise. I found the quietest place that I can find on East Lombard Street and President Street. But Johnson's house is the White House at the end of the block. It dates to 1792, one of the oldest houses in the city. Johnson himself dates to 1767. And let's talk a little bit about him. He, at age 30, so in 1797, he gets elected to Baltimore City Council. 1797, many of you will note, is the year that we merged. Baltimore merged with Fells Point and incorporated as Baltimore City. He serves on that city council. He goes on to serve 6 terms as mayor. And let's talk a little bit about the issues that he faced in those 6 terms, from 1812 until I think about 1822 or so. One of the first issues was the War of 1812 and the attack on our democracy. He was mayor. He was also head of a group called the Committee of Vigilance and Safety. That was the group that was tasked with defending the city against the British attack. And we've already covered the War of 1812, so we won't go too much into that, but I want to focus on one issue that Johnson faced, and that was who to select as a general to oversee our defenses. And he chose a general, Sam Smith, a Revolutionary War hero. Obviously a good choice. We won the naval battle at Fort McHenry. We won the land battle at Patterson Park, then Hampstead Hill. But it wasn't an obvious choice. There was another Revolutionary War general, William Winder, who really wanted that job and who had a lot of political support for it. But bucking that political support and sticking to his guns, Mayor Johnson chooses Sam Smith, who he believes is a better general and better equipped to do the job. So just wanted to start with that one on, we take these things like the defense of Baltimore for granted, but there were lots of decisions and hard decisions that were made into defending our democracy back then. The second issue he faced, again, was of revolving around the War of 1812. And James Madison, President Madison, had a choice to make on whether to declare war. And that was not an easy choice. There were a lot of people who were for war, including a lot of Baltimoreans. One of the major issues was the British were impressing our sailors. They were basically nabbing them off of our merchant marine ships and forcing them to work in British ships. And a lot of Baltimore was for war. We were a port city, and that affected us pretty directly. But not everybody. There were a lot of opponents to the war, including a gentleman named Alexander Hamilton. And that's not to be confused with Alexander Hamilton, the sort of founder of the Federalist Party and now a superstar on Broadway. But Alexander Hamilton was also a Federalist, and the Federalists were more or less opposed to the war. He was also a printer here in Baltimore and was printing tracts that were against the war. Over time, he became so hated, he feared for his life. And it came that one day, about a dozen or two, I think 2 dozen of his colleagues took shelter in his printing office. They were afraid that the mob of Baltimore was going to get them. And soon the mob overtook the printing office and they fled to City Hall, where they basically pleaded for safety. The City Hall officials basically put them where they thought would be the most safe, and that was in the jail. But the jail was soon stormed by the mob. And in steps Johnson, Mayor Johnson again. He is very much pro-war. He is a Jeffersonian Democrat. He is opposed to almost all things political to the Federalists. He does not like Alexander Hamilton personally, but he believes in the rule of law. And so despite his political beliefs and his personal inclinations, he steps in literally between the mob and the folks who are in the Baltimore jail to try to protect them. Unfortunately, he's not successful. The mob gets through. They drag out the 2 dozen Federalists. One of them is killed. All of them are beaten up severely. Incidentally, one of the folks who was in that crowd of Federalists was a gentleman named Henry Lee. He was a Revolutionary War hero, awarded a gold medal from Congress, the only military person under the rank of general to get to be awarded a gold medal. He goes on and fights hard as an advocate in Virginia for adopting the Constitution. If you remember 1788, 1789, we're trying to figure out if we are going to become the United States of America. He is a great champion of adopting the Constitution. He gets dragged out of that jail cell and beaten up so badly that he flees to the West Indies to recuperate. On his way back, his ship stops in Georgia and he dies, so he never recovers from those wounds. He got the nickname Light Horse Harry for his horsemanship. He was the captain of a horse brigade. And you might not know his name historically, Henry Lee, but I will bet that you know his son's name, General Robert E. Lee. All right, back to Edward Johnson. The final thing Johnson faces is an epidemic. It's certainly not COVID-19 like today, but back in 1819, it is yellow fever. He has served 4 terms as mayor and stepped down in 1816. Incidentally, he has his portrait painted on leaving office, and that starts the tradition of mayors getting their portraits painted when they leave office. And maybe when we can, we'll go do a tour of City Hall and we can go back into the mayor's suite and see these wonderful portraits. Johnson's was painted by Rembrandt Peale, if you know the Peale Museum. Johnson has to face this epidemic of yellow fever. He basically calls a blue ribbon commission. He didn't call it that, would call it that, of doctors and scientists who had been studying the causes of yellow fever and treating patients. Back then, the predominant theory was that something called miasma caused yellow fever, sort of swampy gas. It wasn't until around 1900 that we learned and figured out that mosquitoes were the vector for it, including a doctor named Jesse Lazier, who lived in Bolton Hill. That's another story. But Mayor Johnson convenes this committee, and they issue a report. And although they don't guess that mosquitoes are the vector, they do make the connection with to prevent yellow fever. Things like better sewage treatment and clean drinking water are required. The only problem is that the Baltimore City Council is too cheap to pay the $150 to print the report. And printing their report was critical in getting it out to other doctors, other civic leaders, so that Johnson could implement some of the reforms they suggested. So in steps Johnson again and personally pays the $150 to print the report to fight yellow fever, the epidemic sweeping through Baltimore and the country at the time. So here we have a mayor who fights for democracy, sticks up for the rule of law, and is personally stepping forward with the belief that science can be at the forefront of fighting a pandemic, an epidemic back then. I'm going to leave you with a thought that as we all are still mulling over in our minds what happened over the last couple of days, and in fact what's still continuing to unfold, come on down here to East Lombard Street, right at the corner of President Street. Take a look at this wonderful 1792 house that's still there, and think back to Mayor Edward Johnson and the issues and the parallel universe that he lived in. All right, thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.